as well as Mr. Hemant Sangvi, the speaker for today.
So actually, this is an Intech effort. Intech keeps doing various kinds of things. So this is also a project. This project doesn't have an outcome as one report or a map or a conservation proposal. It's slightly different. This was started from a discussion of doing something with styles or Indian architecture of various kinds. And it aims to sort of initiate or sort of set up what I had written earlier, some kind of a bottom-up approach rather than heritage as always, as opposed to increasing top-down exclusive approach. So it looks at the possibility of spreading certain ideas of architecture that we have in this country to people based on the fact that a layperson generally looks at architecture, looks at it, and maybe gets into the buildings, and they have a feel of identifying what it is and how it is built, as opposed to an architect's matured way of looking at buildings, where the architect is trained to look at aspects like typology or history of construction or history of making and spatial aspects and social dimensions, all that. So the aim of the project is to lay down information or data in a very simple matrix, and so that it becomes, on one hand, an approachable, accessible database for lay people who would then benefit from knowing the various kinds of architecture that has happened in India. And on the other hand, this database can be accessed by researchers of various level, and it has its aim to have a dimension in such a way that it can feed even the PhD level researchers who are interested in topics like this, or even an elementary level researcher at the School of Architecture, or even an art history school, or historians also. So what we are doing is, we are looking at architecture in spread out in two very simple ways. One is we start from the fact that material and climate are major aspects of factors of architectural form. So on one hand, on the other hand, there are very matured ideas of architecture. So as Intech, in its last few years way of looking at things, highlights three words, not so officially, but actually. So there was monumental heritage, and Intech started with looking at heritage buildings, monuments, heritage buildings, and then in the 80s there was this surge of vernacular architecture surge. So Intech also operates on the three planes: monuments, heritage buildings, and vernacular. So something like that, we are talking about very basic vernacular style buildings in a different language. We are saying there's nature, culture, and ideology. There are three aspects. There are three matrices. Each one is now laid out with verticals as climatic, geoclimatic zones, which are, let's say, the verticals of the matrix, and the horizontals are various functional types, which are common to all cultures. So what we get is a catalog, identification, some kind of a listing of different kinds of buildings, with a basic factor that geoclimatic zones are important in terms of contributing to architecture. So at the level of nature, where the human interaction and nature is such that the nature still prevailing. And the nature-culture divide is a philosophical issue. Still we say, as the prevalent or the power of nature is gradually overcome by more sophistication of culture, nature is also sophisticated, then the cultural practices are more strengthened, and there are a higher level of architecture happening, and they are more settled, they are more classicalized. So locally developed to culturally consolidated to ideological, the third thing, where the ways or manners, modes of doing architecture are so strong that they can now be exported or imported from one place to other. For example, European architecture has been imported into India. So nature, culture, and ideology. The other aspect of the project is to create this database in terms of this information, connecting all resources that we already have in the country. There are individuals who have gone into various aspects, their own choices of way of looking at these things, and have gathered immense experience. So we want to connect those individuals into this project as resource and also as resources to be identified by the researchers down the line. And also the schools of architecture who are already doing works in this kind. So this lecture series is an attempt to bring in these people and present it to an audience who can continue to carry connecting these things. So there are various ways of looking at the one particular thing. We are not projecting any theoretical idea from ourselves, just spreading the canvas. And on that, we are trapping, so to speak, different people who have looked at the same thing in different ways and from different kind of experience. So this is the second lecture, and roughly, we don't have any real specification for these people, what they talk about, no terms of reference as such. It comes from what they're saying. But roughly what Beni has done and what Hemant is going to do today are bordering towards vernacular. So we'll have other lectures subsequently, please be with us, of various kinds to plug into this system. So, Hemant Sanghvi is a senior architect with decades of experience with traditional as well as contemporary architecture, 2 more lines. His architectural practice has deep faith in the indigenous and time-tested. He firmly believes in the revival of dying practices of traditions. He also believes in preaching what is practiced. We look forward to sharing experience. Another language, different from Katie.
Thank you, Rajat. Thanks a lot. Now, today, my name is Hemant. I'd been living in Delhi for about 20 years, 20 years between 1980 and 2001. And after that, I've been settled in a small town called Morvi in state of Gujarat. और अभी इतने सालों के बाद दिल्ली आ रहा हूँ तो इतनी खुशी हो रही है कि कई लोग मैं जानते हैं, मैं उनको जानता था और सबसे So, what I'm going to be talking today is about my experience since I left Delhi, because in Delhi I was mostly working on architectural projects largely, but ever since I moved back, I think initial years, 3-4 years, the INTAC gave me some work to start my practice there. So that was basically the time when earthquake happened. Before the earthquake, also there was a lot of damage being done by the agencies, other people, people who are like into the trade, including the architectural fraternity. So when I went back, I saw a lot of damage being done. Even my own hometown was almost completely wiped out. And people did not reach there because there was no airport there. So it was never sort of publicized, in the popular media. So that was one reason I wanted to go back. Also my parents, were quite old, so I had to get back there, look after them, and also resettle them into the town. So Morvi is a very small town. It used to be like 20,000 population in 1930 or something, up to that time. But very rich in terms of the kind of, building infrastructure, other things, the area-wise also, it was very, very big. So that gave me some kind of an impetus to start sort of operating from there, because I had my home also there, which had to be also done up, but it had completely collapsed. So that is one reason I went back. Plus also the possibilities of doing things, after the earthquake, because government had woken up, completely, to do it up, And at that time, I think it was Bajpayee's government, and they were very, very active, sometimes overactive. So one had to like go and ensure that, they are not overactive, at least in my town, So that is what I sort of, started doing initially, the restoration work. I didn't know anything about lime. So even when I was working in Delhi, my exposure to the other India, as we call it, about 90% of it was like almost zilch, I knew nothing about it. So that experience also I sort of gained from my association with the Danish government in the 80s, early 80s, for 3-4 years. And that took me all over the place, in Tamil Nadu, countryside of Tamil Nadu, countryside of also Madhya Pradesh, and many other smaller states, So that time the bug beat me very badly that, I mean, that's real India and that's where I should operate from. So I slowly, I started discarding these futuristic notions of architecture. Because when I was like studying in my, doing my master's, it was all about the future, the future projections. What they called metabolistic school of architecture. It's like looking at like, 30 years, 40 years, 100 years, One of which was Buckminster's, the dome. So these are the kind of things people were indulging in, which had nothing to do with reality. And even in India, the architectural work was done by only 6% by the architects. The rest was going to the PWD, and mostly engineers were doing it. So as a result, the contribution of architects was quite minimal. So there was no impact at all. Out of these practicing architects, I think only 10% were actually subserving the rural and tribal masses of our country. So as a result, people who were not living in large urban areas were generally left out completely of the purview of architectural practice. So that particular incidents, with the Danish government gave me a lot of exposure. Also sort of taught me how to look at things, how to look at the people, how they're doing it themselves. That's where the anonymity part came into play. And then I realized that architecture should be practiced anonymously, without any name tags. So that's how I started, and I was always interested in history as a subject. So I knew little about traditions, but then I also started learning more about it after I went back to Gujarat, sort of almost rehashing my history. So that was one exposure which was very, very valuable to me, and thanks to INTAC for sort of offering that stage for me. Although the money was very little, so I ended up losing a lot of money, but still, it was a good exposure for me. So that's how it started, and after that I've been starting, I'm looking at restoration work mostly, also teaching at times in Ahmedabad as well as a place called Rajkot. So that's what my background is. And today what I'm going to be talking about. Your mic. होता है चलो कोई बात नहीं अच्छा उल्टा है. So what I'm looking at today is about the colonial architecture, especially in Western India, and specifically Kathiawar and Kutch, Saurashtra and Kutch. Because Saurashtra has, I think, after Italy, some UNESCO expert had come, and he said after Italy, Saurashtra area has the highest density, right? I think what's Randolph, yeah. Yeah, he said that it was like highest density in the country, in the world, after Italy. So they had like 193 princely states in that small area, out of 555 or something for the entire country. So it was tightly packed with all these princes. And each one had a lot to contribute. And majority of the works that were undertaken by the princes happened after the British came there. Because earlier there were a lot of infighting and like boundaries were changing all the time, very fluid boundaries. So when the British government came there in 1810 or something, one guy called Colonel Walker came in there, and he consolidated all these states, helped freeze the boundaries, and so they all become little states, but with a lot of peace, and they didn't have to maintain an army. So a lot of money, a lot of finances were released, and these finances were spent in making their little towns more visible, more architecturally rich. So I think good 70, 80 years after the advent of Colonel Charnock in Bengal, this Colonel Walker walked in there. Till that time, there was nobody had any interest in Saurashtra because it was a very dry, semi-arid area with not much happening there. Level of prosperity was very, very low. So the major powers were not interested. It was, moreover, controlled by the Gayakwad from Baroda. So even before the British came, there was a lot of Gayakwad influence, Peshwa influence in that area, in terms of architectural uh, layout of the area. And they were mainly dealing with timber, more or less, not very permanent material. So we are also going to talk a little about what happened before the British came, what happened before the Marathas came. Now this area, if you look at the geography of it, so the Colonel Walker came to Rajkot and started the Kathiawad agency, which was looking after all these states plus some other states in Kutch as well. Now, around the same time when he came there in 1810, there was also a massive earthquake, which changed the geographic status of Kutch altogether. Because earlier Kutch used to be an island. Now, with this earthquake, certain parts of Kutch came up, so it got again attached back to the land, and that's how it was earlier also. So agency was sitting in, basically the governor of Bombay was controlling the Kathiawad agency. So the Bombay state that time, Bombay presidency as they called it, was quite huge in area, going all the way up to Sindh and Karachi. Karachi was part of it, some parts of Goa and beyond. The North Kannada was also part of it. So this one is Elphinstone College in Mumbai. So actually what we call the colonial palette, the European palette, was actually provided mostly by the Bombay scene. What was happening in Bombay was also copied elsewhere. वहाँ पे फ्रीज हो गया. Okay. No, it's okay. Yeah. So what they found in Mumbai, mostly princes also had their places in Mumbai as well as Delhi. So what they found in Mumbai was immediately sort of copied back home. So they had all these. So even the small towns, were affected by what was happening in Mumbai. So that was the area. Okay. That was the area of Mumbai, and these are all the princely states in Saurashtra and Kutch. Kutch was basically one unit controlled by the Maharao of Kutch, and they had the Nawabi states in north of Gujarat. And this entire area, which is in Pakistan now, Sindh, was also controlled from Mumbai, with some Portuguese pockets in between. So this building came up to receive George V, and supposed to be inaugurated in 1911, but it got delayed and it opened finally in 24. So this was a classic example of the what we call the composite architectural idiom, which is mixed with what was prevalent in Gujarat that time, which is mainly the Sultanate architecture. So all the elements, So what was happening in the western part of India was that you had a very strong tradition in stone, and mostly done the practice for the temples. So now that very strong traditional the talent was finally sort of incorporated by people who came there, especially the Sultanate of Gujarat. So all these elements that you sorry. So ये जो सारे elements आपको दिख रहे हैं, they have like so you have the colonial idiom, you have some European elements there, as well as you have the elements from Gujarat Sultanate. Yeah. So these brackets, etc. So this was much later, but earlier. Now you see, that's my hometown, Morvi. So in Saurashtra, when I visited, surveyed the place in 1990, I had counted something like 80 such fortified towns in Saurashtra, and the fort was fully intact. So there was earlier, there was a, I'm pushing a wrong one. Yeah. So you had earlier, there is one gate here, one gate here, one gate somewhere here. So there were 4 gates, and one side was bounded by the river. So पहले यहाँ पे fort wall was, it was somewhere here, went around this way, and then later on in the 1850s, around 1850s, this entire wall was extended, built, rebuilt. So again, in a small town like this, you see many layers of architectural styles. So you can almost term it as a pre-British, then post-British, and later on also some Art Deco buildings came up in this area. Now this is a very small village, but most of the villages in this area, because of these changing boundaries, they were all fortified earlier. This is built, this is a palace, small palace called Halwat Palace. It is built during the British times, I think 1890 or something. No, it was built in, it finished 500 years or something, right? So it's like much before the British arrived there. So it follows idiom which is like part Indian, part Islamic, and also some influence also came from Sindh area. Now this one marks a very important event out there, because in after the Colonel Walker era, you had like 60 years, and after that there was one Prince's College was opened there, the first experiment. So you can directly link it with whatever was Lord Bantic had envisaged by way of education, how to sort of create the cadre, administrative cadre, etc. Plus also subjugate all the princes. So these were most of the princes in Saurashtra were trained. It's a Rajkumar College, the first college that came up in 1870. After that Mayo came up, there was one in Lahore, Atchison College, one in Indore, Delhi College, and one in Raipur, another Rajkumar College. So 5 colleges were opened to train the princes. And it seemed the experiment was hugely successful, because this from very small towns, when the princes came here, so they were completely indoctrinated by the Britishers. The teachers came from England, and when they finished their studies in when they graduated, whatever class 12 or O level or senior Cambridge, they were immediately taken by the ADCs. They were given one ADC. So ADC would take them to Europe, for European tours. So when these princes came back with these very grandiose kind of ideas, and they started immediately implementing them in their home states. So earlier, when the school opened, most of the buildings they were almost purely European in nature. So one prince also got graduated and went there from Jamnagar. So I think he must have seen that San Angelo in Rome. So he tried to replicate the same thing here. Looks very, very similar. Now I thought it would be very interesting to understand the area because we hardly ever look into geographic extent of the area. So what is, if you look at now this entire part, the western part, the part west of Aravallis, is totally, connected with the western parts, all the way up to the Mediterranean Sea. Now it has very little connection with the mainland India, which is somewhere here. So all the invaders who came from this side here, through Khyber and Bolan Pass, they were actually confined to mostly these areas. Took them a long, long time. Even the Arab army and the Turkic army, which came around here in the 711 or something, they were like held up for almost 400 years in these areas. So the Kutch, Saurashtra, most of Rajasthan, Sindh, they are actually ethnically as well as culturally better linked with the western part, the Persia and Afghanistan, than parts of India. So that's the area we are talking about. So the entire this area, the Saurashtra was island once upon a time, and Kutch was island was an island before 1820. So it was totally disconnected from the mainland India. It was almost like a situation that we have here in Sri Lanka. So also worked as a refuge for a lot of people who are fleeing the political upheavals. So here you can see it more clearly. So that's the very flat salty plains. This is like Run of Kutch. This is a little Run of Kutch here. And this entire area behind it is Sindh, and very dry, completely arid, except for the course of the Indus River. So this had become a huge barrier, Indus River itself, so people who came in from this side, first of all, it was very difficult to cross these ranges of the Karakorams up here and Suleiman range here. It was very difficult to cross over except for these tiny two passes in the hills. So most of the armies that came here, they never wanted to go back because this is the only green patch between here and the Mediterranean, So similar thing happened to even the army of the Alexander the Great, because he crossed these parts here. When he came up here in through the Karakorams, he was carrying an army of 300,000 people. So when he finally crossed over, it came to the plains of Punjab, he had only 150,000 left. And after that, when he was like going down the river, thinking it's going to link up with Nile somewhere, that was the extent of his geographical knowledge. So he thought that there is Nile somewhere at the end of the Indus River. So he took down on the barges his entire army of 150,000 people. When he finally reached at the mouth, then there were only 10,000 people left, because everybody had defected. So they would like get off on the left bank of the river. Nobody went on the right bank because it was the desert of Persia. So it's a very hostile kind of environment here. On this side of Indus, it was very, very green and very fertile area. So a lot of these Greek soldiers defected. So when he went back, he had 10,000 soldiers with him. Finally, when he reached, through the southern route, which was quite merciless, the Makran coast and all that. So most of them died there also, When he reached there finally, Babylon, I think he had only about 30, 40 people with him, very close confidants. So ये था, because if this is a satellite map, this is how it used to be earlier. This entire place, Kutch was an island anyway. Saurashtra was island except for these little parts, So historically, like almost like 2000 years ago, this was also a riverine delta. So there was actually no land in this area. This is Ice Age picture. So this part, when people started migrating, the human race started, Homo sapiens, I think from Africa they came up in this part first, which was very green, the Persian Gulf. Even today, if you notice, it's only, every depth is only about 50 meters. So both the rivers that came into it, Euphrates, Tigris, they were like draining this area. Anyway, this doesn't concern us. Now, if you look at the ethnicity of the area, the ethnic pattern, the people, the kind of people who came and settled down there, one important factor was that, it was directly connected with the Silk Route, That's a Silk Route. And there was a southern connection, which came all the way down to Saurashtra. So a lot of people who were fleeing the political anarchy, they would come and settle down in Saurashtra because, Saurashtra basically was the last point for them, last point of the journey. So this is the same route also the Muhammad of Ghazni took, 3 or 4 times in 25 years, because he would come every time down this route here from Multan, come to Somnath, loot it and go back. So that's also a lot of people came, in a small town like Morvi. Today, if you look at it closely, the cross-section of people, you find lots of people from Mediterranean kind of origins, including the Balochis, a lot of Balochis there, people from Makran area, lots of people from Sindh. This is like a long time ago they arrived there. And this is how the Suleiman range in Balochistan looks. It's quite merciless. People just cannot travel through this area at all. Now every summer, all these people, come to collect chas at my place. We distribute chas. So I realized this time that, when I looked at these faces, and then I realized there are so many different kinds, so many strains, racial and ethnic strains in these people, It's only a small town, but people for centuries they have come and settled down, different kinds of people, different faiths, different religions, different backgrounds, social backgrounds. So I found it very interesting that there are so many different strains that you find in one small little place. So little about the kind of traditions that existed in this part, in the western part, west of Aravallis. So idiom in architecture we call the Gurjar Pratyara style, which was actually the refinement of what is called Nagara style. There are three main styles in our country, the temple building styles. One was the southern style, the Gopura style. The second was the Kalinga style, or what they call the Nagara style. And third, which developed later, much later, was called the Gurjar Pratyara. So it was named after the Gurjar Pratyara kingdom in the early medieval times. So they refined the style which was prevalent in the eastern parts and also the northern hills, and created a new idiom called the Gurjar Pratyara. And most of it was like refined and finalized around the area what we call the Malwa region, which is like Chittorgarh, Malwa, the lower Aravallis. So this is a classic example of Gurjar Pratyara style. So if one goes to Chittorgarh, it's almost like an outdoor museum there, with so many styles. The entire development of Gurjar Pratyara style, you can see there, witness it. 7th century till the 15th. These of course came much much later. These are the Jain temples in Paltana, but they were still continue to follow the same style. The old the shastras that they follow. Tiana, the hilltop in Saurashtra. So they already had a history of building in that area, building in stone. So it was not very difficult to bring an alien style and superimpose on the. So that's what happened earlier, before the new idioms began to come in. That is a classic Gurjar Pratyara style. So on one hand, you had the style which was local Gurjar Pratyara, finally fully refined style of temple building, and stone cutters all over the place. The tribe called the Sompuras. They were practicing for almost 1,000 years. After the fall of Khajuraho, they all came down to this area. So you had these two idioms coming together. One is the Khorasani idiom, which was practiced in parts of Afghanistan, parts of Iran, and also in Sindh already by that time. So that was brought in here by the sultans of Gujarat. And then you had the local style. So if you look carefully, most of it is see the lower half here, most of it is like the temple building, temple columns, etc. What they did was take out all the figurines from the architectural template, and also the animals. Other than that, they didn't change very much except for these domes, which like Khorasani domes, which they brought in. But most of the workers were local people who were later on converted and taken to Fatehpur Sikri also, the same people. So the guy who founded Ahmedabad, Ahmad Shah, he was earlier, he came from Sindh area. Before that he was in, his family came from Afghanistan, and he came and settled down, founded Ahmedabad, and started, the welding two styles. So initial experiments were quite immature. Yeah. So the Muhammad Shah, who had founded the city of Champaner in Gujarat, he finally came down to Ahmedabad and settled down there, and that's what came of a new hybrid or new crossbred style, the composite style of Gujarat architecture. Now this very same thing was also taken later on by Akbar, because Mughals came much later. And this style, what we call the Pathani style or Khorasani style, had its roots in Mandu, because they came to Mandu, settled down there in the Malwa plateau, and developed the style fully. Then they came to Gujarat. It was further refined. So Islamic geometry played a great role in it. So all these things are elements are mainly borrowed from the Gurjar Pratyahara temples, temple styles. You can see it here as well. You can see all the patterns here, the kind of toran, etc. If you see Fatehpur Sikri, they had this serpentine bracket there, which also had roots in this Gurjar Pratyahara style. But it surprisingly looks very strong, no? I mean, it is very strong. It doesn't look strong. The bracket. So now the imperial architecture and also religious architecture, later on it also found its way into the civic architecture of the area. So again, similar kind of pattern, similar. So it almost became like a template which was practiced all over Gujarat and Kutch. The what we call the Sultanate style. So these are the brackets I'm talking about. It looks very weak, that will not survive, but actually in reality they are quite strong. So this was created in Fatehpur Sikri by the craftsmen who came from Gujarat, the master craftsmen. So they experimented these ones in a small mosque in Fatehpur called the Stone Cutters. It's in there, right? That's where they started working it out. This is a Jain temple in Mount Girnar. So this is the same template, same style, which was practiced by the Sultanate, also implemented. It almost became like the matrix, which you had to practice. You could not do anything else. Now this particular one had some influence from Sindh. This is what was being done in Kutch area. Some of Sultanate, some of areas in Sindh, and again it was a composite style practiced only in Kutch and northern parts of Saurashtra, the Kathiawad. So in reality, you had two things being practiced simultaneously. One was a composite idiom propagated by the sultans, and the other one was the earlier style, the pre-Sultanate style, which was being practiced in Sindh and parts of Saurashtra, and which was also kept alive by certain schools of the Sompuras. So like you have two idioms side by side. One is which is Sultanate idiom, which was a crossbred a composite, which is this one is an original idiom which was being practiced by people in the same area. So what happened, is that these people actually had started different school of Sampuras, which they did not subscribe to this particular school, but they continue to practice. Even today, you find remnants of these people. This one was in Morbi, also based on Sindhi style. This one is in a very, very bad state now, and nobody is doing anything about it. Very beautiful palace. This one is in Jamnagar. So after the Sultanate was defeated in the 17th century, or late 17th century and early 18th century, by the Marathas. The Marathas came to control most of Gujarat, So all the levies which were collected by earlier the sultans from all these princely states, the Marathas started, levying these people, the local princes. So there were actually all these small principalities were never independent states, but they were like always paying levies to some people. Earlier it was the Gayakwad, before that it was Sultanate, after that it was Marathas, and later on the British took over from Maratha in 1820. So when the Peshwas came, they're like all in constant war with the Muslims, Muslim armies. So their temple, when they started building temple, they propagated a new style, which was like, which did not have shikhara, and it almost looked like residences. So that style also found, its way into Saurashtra in many places. So this is like a small temple which was taking after Peshwa style, and so this what they are courtyard temples. So you don't have shikhara. Very similar to what they also do in areas like Ahmednagar. Entire Ahmednagar, you have this kind of temples. So the invading armies, don't attack it. I found this is very beautiful. This one is in the palace in Darbargarh of Jamnagar, and it must date the old palanquin. It must date around 18th century, early 18th century. So this was like going back to the British inspired development. So Victoria's Golden Jubilee in 1887 was one very, very important year when a lot of things began to happen. So between two jubilees, 1887, 1897, the diamond one, lots of activities began to happen, the building activities. So almost like each state was asked to produce a lot of works. And by that time also all these schools had opened, princely schools had opened. So they were already inspired and influenced by the European architecture, European template. So they started replacing their own original templates with European idioms. Almost completely wholesale. So if there was an organic settlement, small town, what they would do is cut right through, slice through the town, old town, organic town, with a Regency Street. One end would be the city palace, other end would be the gate, main gate, city gate. And almost all states, all 193 states began to sort of, imitate this pattern, new pattern. So initially it must have felt very uneasy, two styles living together. But later on, I think it's began to have some kind of symbiotic relationship with each other. Now this was almost like a regulation statue which was given to every state, free of cost. Well, nothing is free of cost, of course. But yeah, the marble statues, mass produced in England, were brought in here. And the globe is taken out, you can see the left hand is broken. So scepter in one hand, globe in the other hand. So these are now the styles that European inspired styles and the era can be easily divided into three parts. One is like when they came in after the school opened in Rajkot, 1870 onwards. The most of the architecture that was like practiced by the people was purebred, European template. Almost went on for 30, 40 years. And then later on only people began to sort of experiment with the local and the European model. So these are almost pure European inspired, designed by European people.
Which building is this and where is this?
This one is Prag Mahal in Bhuj, Kutch. Now it's very badly damaged. This is after the earthquake, you can see it. And one part had almost entirely collapsed. So these are very, very small states. Bhuj around the time when it was built must be not more than 10,000 people in that city. And before the earthquake, it was almost like a little historic capsule. You could see it was almost like very medieval. Once you enter the fort wall, the neighborhoods, the building style, the people that were lived, looked very medieval. It was very beautiful too. Okay. So these are palace in Porbandar, this one here, the seaside palace there. It was also done in purely European style. This palace never got fully built, it was like they had to stop working on it. So this one had some elements, local elements as well in. It's again 1870, 1880 vintage. So these are all European examples, purely European examples, which were basically inspired by the school in Rajkot and their visits to European countries. So by that time, I think by 1890 or something, there, around the time of the Jubilee, Victoria Jubilee, I think most of the people, most of the princes, their minds were completely subjugated. So they became fully westernized. Now this one particularly, this is a very, very small town. But you had 193, so if you look at the density, 193 states in that area, each one has one city palace, one outside the town retreat, and you had one which was taking after the, the later model, 1940s model, Art Deco style. Yeah. Huh? This one is in Upleta. Yeah, very small towns. People don't even go there, But they had beautiful palaces there. Now this is taken over by the local municipality, and they are storing. It's become the storage yard. So they are storing cement bags and all the equipment and tractors behind it. So this is what is happening, So along with the palaces, there was also a flurry of school buildings and hospitals. Suddenly they became very, very sort of enlightened in all the princes who came back from Europe. So they also started imitating the administrative model of the Europeans. ये इसने बनाया था. What's his name? Ribeiro, yeah, Ribeiro.
It's Banayan Resto.
Ah, restored, yeah.
No, this is French.
This is a hospital there in Bhavnagar. Now here templates changes slightly. Yeah. So these lot of schools came up, and they were named after local governors. Governors meaning the Bombay Presidency governors. They came and inaugurated them, and they were like Alfred, like there are 10 Alfred colleges in Gujarat, Saurashtra. This looks one statue of the statue that you saw of Victoria was earlier placed inside. There is a hall here, central hall. It was placed there, and this came up in 1893. So immediately after the first Jubilee. So around the time of Jubilee, all these statues were distributed. Yeah, Mahendra Singh Hospital. Now also what very important things happened in this area is that there were like major states, like Bhavnagar, Jamnagar, the Morvi was important, Dhangadhara was important. About 10 such states which had like the A-grade states in that area. And each one began to develop their own little, style of architecture. So Morvi style was different from Dhangadhara style. Dhangadhara style was different totally from Rajkot style, which was like company style architecture. Jamnagar was totally different. It was totally European model, Italian model. So Morvi had a lot of black quartzite. So their style began to be identified: black quartzite walls and sandstone that came from Dhangadhara. Important thing happened that Dhangadhara was in debt to Morvi state, and they were not paying up, and that's why they started building this Mani Mandir, and they got stone free of cost. Yeah. So this particular one in Gondal is also inspired by the colonial idiom, but heavily sort of mixed up with the local style, local Indian style, the Islamic style. This is in the middle of the town, this tower in Morvi. And this entire, the cast iron work was fabricated in Scotland, Glasgow, and brought in, shipped in here. And when the earthquake happened, I thought, and I was in Delhi, so I thought when I go back, this would be lying flat on the main street, But nothing happened to it, surprisingly. One doesn't know what kind of foundation does it have.
It's just placed on this gate.
Yeah, but this would be very susceptible, no, to that kind of violent earthquake. Now these are Bori mosque. So Boris were also like very rich, wealthy people generally. So there are three groups in Gujarat. The mercantile Muslim groups, the Khojas, Boris, and Memon. They have traditionally been very, very rich, and they are also slightly more enlightened than other groups, because they are also based in Mumbai. So there is a lot of Mumbai influence coming into Saurashtra, and they are absolutely Vatan Parast, So everybody must, once a year, they must come home for about a month, And Kutch mein, they take 4 months off from Mumbai. The very busy people, very wealthy people, but they spend about 4 months in Kutch every year. The people who are retired, semi-retired, and in the villages, So if you see a banyan tree or some chabutra around it, you find a lot of these Mumbaiites, sitting there, gossiping away. And so that is a pattern also all over Saurashtra. Like what you see in Shekhawati, for example. All the people, from all over the place, they would come back once a year at least. किसी का मुंडन है, किसी का शादी है, किसी का ये है, आके पूरे गांव को खाना खिलाते हैं. So similar pattern also happens in these parts, Kutch and Saurashtra. So Bohras are an enlightened group, and they started practicing this Rococo Baroque style architecture. This is about 120 years old now, 15 years. 1907 it was built, this mosque. But very beautiful one, very well appointed place. So each state also, each major state in that area also had retreats, basically centers for tax collection. So they would like all scattered all over the place, so the prince would go and stay there for a few days. So they would set up a retreat. You've seen this, right, Divay? Yeah. This is a small Barwala palace, small retreat. Beautiful. No, now it's been taken down by PWD. They burnt all the windows and doors and took it away. And it was held up because, there's once I think the pair snakes, the Nag Baba came around, So any time a worker goes in, the Nag suddenly surfaces up, So it was held up for about a year. I don't know, there's some kind of Moorish and Venetian influence here. This is Baroda Arts College in Baroda. So Baroda practiced different kind of architecture generally. They were almost reactionary to anything else anywhere. So as a result, this one is a very, very weak structure, the Arts College. Because the dome is oversized dome, no? And the lower structure is not able to take the load. You've seen the museum? A very beautiful museum. There are beautiful collection of Verma, Ravi Verma, and also a very nice collection of this Rorik, the Svetala Rorik. Ravi Verma was actually employed by the Baroda state. He stayed there for some years. Most of a lot of his work was done there. Early work, So that's why his women are always looking like Marathi women, Marathi attire. So very quaint and queer kind of architecture they practice, very nice looking, some of it, mostly in wood and bricks. Yeah, but a totally new kind of idiom. You don't find parallels anywhere. Of course, inspired, it's a European-inspired style. This one is a school in Bhavnagar. Again, Alfred School. This, I think, could be classic Indo-Saracenic. I don't know, because terms are very difficult, Indo-colonial, Indo-Saracenic, you don't know how it can be defined, It's very difficult to give it a proper term. I don't know what Oxford Dictionary says, But Indo-Saracen, what is Saracen? It's somewhere in Iran, right?
In Afghanistan,
Uh,
Saracens.
Saracen. This is another high school. This one is in Dangadra. Dangadra has some very beautiful buildings, very beautiful buildings. That was also first class state and also overseen by the political agent in Rajkot. You tell me when time is up. That's same, is like in picture probably taken in 1920s, in early 20s. They had also a tramway in the town, and they used to charge 1 anna, which was, I'm sure it must have been a lot of money for a full trip. It was taken out later on the tracks.
Structural top is on steel.
Animal driven tramway, huh?
Cast
Cast iron, upar ka, yeah, cast iron, yeah. Yeah. This is company style architecture in Rajkot. Company had its own style again because Princes had different style, and company followed a very austere, very stoic kind of style. Not much ornamentation. ये कहाँ जाएगा? Yeah, this one is in Goa. Indo-Portuguese. This is the main gateway to the city of Morbi. Lloyd Gate, yeah. And that's a mosque I was talking about. The Baroque style inside. This can also see, so each one of these, this can be called Indo-Saracenic. This can also be called Indo-Saracenic, some elements like that. This can also be defined as perhaps proper Indo-Saracenic. These are mausoleum in Junagadh. So in terms of if we are to define this style or categorize it or write something about it, I think it would be very, very difficult because you also have little, say something like Shahjahani elements in it, again stylized. And Hyderabad, I think, has a lot of this kind of styles, buildings. This is 1930, the hospital in Morbi, which Jam Ranji had inaugurated. इसमें कुछ बंगलदार रूफ है, कुछ इस्लामिक डोम है.
This is Vijay Vilas Manvi.
In Kutch, yeah. Rajneesh has one point wanted to buy it off, take it over. Something like 1,000 acres attached to it. This is Indo-Saracenic. Also, a lot of, I think, Jaipur portfolio began to also, affect these styles. So a lot of changes came about because of that. So that almost became like a Bible to these people. People who were not qualified architects, but wanted to build, like Mani Mandir, for example, right? It was designed by a local guy who was not even a qualified engineer. The temple in Baroda. This is the third level of development between 1870 to say 1910 or something. One style prevailed. Later on, it became almost like a composite idiom. And then after that, in the 30s, they also began to build this kind of styles. This is built in the 1930s or even 40s. One in Jamnagar. 20s ka hai? And built by Shapuji Palanji. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about composite, this is absolute example of composite architecture in India, because a lot of styles sort of come in here, merge together, and it's not very good looking building, but yeah, you can see it trace a lot of influences. This is also in Jamnagar. Yeah. Yeah, but this is very, very British. I find it very colonial. Some Islamic influence, but other than that, it's a colonial interpretation of Islamic architecture. Yeah, the same Bora Masjid. After the earthquake, they painted it over. Now again they are removing paint. They are trying to expose that black stone behind it. The Vankane Palace. Now this one particularly had no designers at all, no British designer, no European designer. The Pratap Singh, the Raja who expired recently, he had designed it. He said he designed it, right? I don't know. Yeah. So later on, this kind of things began to happen in the area. 1940s, they didn't realize that we are going to be independent, The flurry of building just kept on and on and on. And then when it became independent, they had to hand over all these schools to the government.
Can I request you to wind up in about 5 minutes?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Time for questions.
Huh?
Sorry.
It's okay, yeah. I wanted you to be your picture. This beautiful building in Morvi, after the earthquake, was going for 5 lakhs rupees. It had 8 rooms, 3-storied. But I had no money because I had gone bankrupt, and gone back,
I wish I had one.
Huh? I wish you had loaned me the money. So yeah, this is like the way it used to be. The beautiful drive. This probably taken around the 1930s or 40s, this picture in Morvi. And it continued to be like that for a long time. This just before the earthquake, or maybe after the earthquake. And Kutch has a lot of small towns, just like Saurashtra. And there are also people who went away to earn money, mostly Mumbai. But also a lot of people went to Burma and made their money in rice trading and timber trading. So timber trade was mostly in the hands of the Muslim merchant groups, Khojas and Memon mostly, because the Hindus were not allowed to go overseas, So the Vaishnavas especially. So it was the timber trade was controlled by these two groups, Boras and Khojas, and the rice trade was completely controlled by the Banias. And they built these havelis in Kutch, very small villages, but nobody ever lived in those. It's just like Shekhavati, Not abandoned, they would come every year, open it. They would have a staff maintaining it. But they would actually not come and live in these Havelis. So this Queen Victoria again, who doesn't look like Victoria. But this is like, again, must have been mass produced. You also find it in Rajasthan. Mass produced somewhere in Scotland and brought in here. So this is a very, very small town in Kutch called Durgapur. Probably has at least 30, 40 Havelis like this, all locked up or rented out. And this majority of people in this Durgapur town are Jain Banyas, who are living mostly in Mumbai, but also parts, some of them in Bangalore and Kerala as well. A lot of spice traders are there from Kutch. Hmm? And Kannanur, they don't call it Kannanur, they call it Kana Mangrol, because there is one Mangrol town in Saurashtra. So they changed the name altogether. And they only come back for matrimonial purposes and then they go back. This beautiful Haveli came down 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I think Krutat Singh of Kutch, he was actually fighting for it. Owners are living in Bangalore. And some part of the family wanted to sell it off, the extended family. But very, very nice Haveli in Mandvi. So when this colonial idiom came, also some of these religious buildings had to began to pretend, English or the European. So this one is Haveli. Haveli? It's a Nath Dwara. What are they called? Pushti Magi, the Vaishnavites, and most of the Bhatiyas, subscribe to this faith. Very conservative and extremely rich people. This is a guy who was the Bora family, which lived in Madagascar. This one here. So in 1905, he built this 3-storied Haveli for 3 brothers. So there are 3 parts, identical parts in it. And in this earthquake, nothing happened to it. Whereas a lot of lower buildings, smaller buildings came down, nothing happened. But he later on, he wanted to demolish it. And finally, I convinced him that, he just readjust some of the stones, the ashlar blocks, and it'll be okay. And it worked very well. So till today, he's quite thankful to me. अभी किसी को भी भेजता हूँ इस घर में, वो मना नहीं करते कभी. So again in Morvi town, people from Calcutta, people who settled down in Calcutta, they own this Haveli, and there were like 6 tenants in this area 2 years ago. Now it has been brought down. They're sold out. Again, a Bori Haveli, people settle in Colombo on this place. Now it doesn't have any owner. So all the doors and windows are removed. And it's very beautiful because it's what is nice about the Haveli is that you actually enter from the street side, which is somewhere here. Okay, so enter the top floor first. This floor here. Then you go on top, or you can come down 3 levels. And there are 18 rooms or something there. But nobody. Another very important town in terms of the colonial architectural sweep is Palitana town. Because Palitana is the Jain stronghold, and a lot of Marwadis also come there, the Rajasthani groups. So each group or each clan builds a little dharamshala for, itself. And so there are so many dharamshala, each one, prescribing a different kind of idiom. And now they are all being brought down by the kabadis, you know. Because trust is looking after them, and trust me, if one or two guys, you know, are a little greedy, they would just, you know, outvote the other people and sell it off. अभी इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ ये था, लेकिन अभी आई थिंक वी कैन डू इट सम अदर टाइम. Now this is like PWD, how PWD handles it. You know. After the earthquake, you know, PWD saw a lot of money in it. Before that, PWD ministry was not very strong, very lucrative. You know. But after the earthquake, they saw a lot of potential. So now, after finance, you know, PWD has become the most sought after ministry. Not only Gujarat, but other states as well, you know, even in Mumbai. But they are sitting on a lot of money. So this is like in 1920s, 1930s. You see everyone with a pagadi there. 1920-30, the bridge. Now the water supply department wanted to build a pipeline about 10 years ago, right? ADB funded project. So they knocked off this part here, ये पूरा का पूरा जो area ने यहाँ पे गिरा दिया because they wanted to turn the pipes, you know. ठीक है? Then that's what they started doing, you know. The entire drive, beautiful riverside drive, was dug up, you know. So I requested them, we filed a petition, everything, and nothing seemed to work, you know. So finally I realized that it's an ADB funded project, so Asian Development Bank को चिट्ठी डाला. Some Swedish gentleman was sitting, Sorensen or something, and he immediately replied. Next day the work was stopped, and they said, you know, पूरे की पूरे जो railings है, उसको ठीक करके तुम जाओगे, otherwise you'll be fired. And they repaired it. But local guys, all the way up to Gandhinagar, would not listen to anyone. Now that historic school in Dhangadhara, that's what is happening. Now this contract was given to some people in Ahmedabad. You know. So after earthquake, what happened? That a lot of these conservation architects or so-called conservation architects in Gujarat, especially in Ahmedabad, were given these large-scale contracts. Entire district they would take over. You know, so this district was taken over by one of the conservation architects, practicing architect in Ahmedabad. You know, and that's the kind of stuff, shocking stuff he was doing there. You know, see. He was controlling everything, you know, education department, other departments, but mainly education. So this was very beautiful, and I have not seen more elegant arches like this in Saurashtra, you know, in anywhere in Saurashtra. And this was fully repairable, restorable. The stones are very beautifully sized and beautifully cut. Ashlar masonry, not much mortar there. Only thing there, what they had to do was just put it together. You know. Cornerstone was very intact, you know, so the plumb line was okay. All they had to do was like take some of the stone and put it together. Like, you know, the way you handle bricks, you handle stone. And it would have worked, you know. But the education department was hell-bent on, you know, tearing it down completely. And this was sitting on a plot of 6.5 acres of land. And so we said you can build elsewhere, you know, it's a small area it occupies, you know, you can build elsewhere. But why the same footprint, you know? Then said, no, we cannot tell you. But, you know, they were actually after the timber inside the ceilings, you know. That's all. Doors and windows. You know. And this is also inspired by the PWD, because PWD is a caretaker agency for all departments, all ministries, you know. So they are also working as advisors. They take 8% from the concerned department to advise them on it. And they also appoint the contractor and also the demolition man. Okay, so demolition man actually on paper, you know, he has to be paid money. to demolish it, right, and removing this effect. But in reality, it pays the government officials, for the timber that he takes out. So it's like the game that has been going on for a very long time now. Very beautiful. I was sitting there for 3 days, I said, let me see how fast are they working. It was very easy. And all this stone, all these pieces that you see, they can be very easily reused, the ashlar masonry, the Angadra, beautiful, very hard sandstone. And look at the span of, it's a very elegant building. Again, this one was also, this is a school in an adjoining town called Halvad, the old capital of Dhangadra royalty. So this was also given to the same conservation architect. Now, so what he suggests or what he recommends is removing old Burmatic planks on top. Several hundred tons, in all the schools, And what he replaces it with is a marine ply, saying that it's much more effective than the Burmatic planks. And beautiful planks. I got some at home. Very beautiful plants, something like 120, 130 years of seasoning. And nothing has happened to it, no rot at all. And when you sort of plane it, it like surface looks so beautiful. फिर एक मोरबी का एक दूसरा है दिव्या कितना Okay, this is like taken in 1930s, 1940s. There's the old, what they call the guest house, the state guest house was there. So this was again in I think 99. I had done the listing for intact. So 99 ka hai. This is after the earthquake, almost intact. The only roof had to be repaired slightly. So what the PWD does is this. Removes. So thereafter, the priceless timber. Now nobody can stop them. You can, go on filing complaints, go on sending petitions, sending requests to people, meeting the people in Gandhinagar. Waste so much time doing it. In the end, the government always prevails. See, so much timber there. So I think within 10-15 days they knocked it down completely. To replace it with this. They had a ready building, a lot of, something like 30,000-40,000 square feet of usable area. They were not doing anything with it, but they wanted to create a project. So they created a project and it replaced it with this. So that is what happening all over the place. We'll just quickly, these are the beautiful Havelis, 1930s vintage. Lovely. So this is what has happened, And you feel so sad and so very sorry for yourself, That you're sitting there not able to do anything at all. You don't have money to buy it off, nor can you help the Haveli. This is a collector's building. That's where the collector is. This is early, again 1999 picture, 1990 picture, listing mein. PWD wanted to knock it down, take away all the timber, and we protested. They said we'll retain the walls, So what they do is just remove it, everything, flatten it on top, and that's what they do. So they are right. They retain the wall, but they knocked off the building, in the spirit of the building. Yeah. This is another palace. This is going down now. This is like earmarked for demolition. And one has to work very hard to save it. This is a beautiful school also. 1893, that school. Morbi locals, including Hemant Sanghvi, prevent demolition of heritage building, And nothing comes of it, It was working. After the earthquake, children were studying there, There was nothing to be done. And Intact had, I think, earmarked 5 lakhs of rupees, which was found sufficient to repair the cracks, That's all, cracks in the plaster. And still they had to demolish and they were selling me these stones, arch stones for 5 rupees. They take it, otherwise you have to pay to throw it away. ये किया, बहुत बढ़िया बिल्डिंग था, बहुत ही बढ़िया बिल्डिंग. This hall was, he measured 45 feet across. And what they replace it with? In the modern building like this. So that's a problem. ये मेरा अपना काम है, what I am doing there. But anyway, let's not talk about that. Jai Hind. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. There are a lot of students I see. You should have been sitting in front, so we can have a little parley here.
If anybody has any questions, we'll just go for a short round before we just thank him.
Thank you so much, dear Hemen. We are good old friends. Very beautifully presented.
I cannot see that far. Who are you?
You can't figure it out. I got a beard by now. You don't visit Delhi so often.
Yeah, you're looking different, man.
Yes.
Okay.
No, good. Good that you recognize me. We all age, I think, like these buildings. I don't want to pull down my beard like you don't want to pull down the buildings. No, but I will die.
ठीक था?
Okay.
Was it okay?
Was okay.
Was it okay?
Yeah. I've seen many of these slides earlier.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Besides the evolution of the facades and the volumes and the iconography in these buildings, is there a attempt also, because you would have done your research inside the buildings also, to develop spaces, to develop the plans also along, because you have a lot of British influences, as you mentioned, you have Islamic influences and many others, as well the technology that is used to building it, such stone as material, steel as material, composite, jack arches, and so on, walls, domes and all.
Right.
Did you find that also in the development along with the facades?
Yeah, because when the style, the imperial style, which came down from top, when it was vernacularized, and accepted by the merchant groups in the city, they would make those changes, because each merchant group, for example, catered to a different ethnicity or the clan, For example, the Soni, would do it differently than the Jain, or Jain would do it differently from Bohras or the Memons, the Muslim groups, So they would have different kind of lifestyles, So the plans had to be different, but they also handled it, the technology they handled it differently, So they also made a lot of improvisations, That it's a long duration of trial and error kind of thing. If sometimes it comes down, we don't know. So then you have to sort of also pay for it. But there were a lot of experiments happening. So if you want to break it down and systematically analyze, the entire development, it would take several hundred volumes, Each town has a different style, different groups of people living there, different historic background, different set of materials. The entire material regime is different. So it's like the permutation, combination, the variables are so many that you cannot possibly study it. Not possible, because you have to take interviews. So it's a lot of sociology also comes into play. A lot of religious factors come into play. So, it can be a subjective study, but you cannot put it down in any kind of form. But it's like amazing, mind-boggling, the variety that exists in a small area. If you look at the whole of our country in India, this is like a little mini India sitting there, but the whole of our country is like that. Go to a place like Bundelkhand, you just freak out. The possibilities that exist there, and the number of the development that exists there. At all levels, all levels. It's quite amazing. Yeah. So when I was studying here, when I was studying architecture, I didn't realize that I was wasting a lot of my time. बोलो आप बोलो.
It's a reasonably thin down audience.
हाँ ठीक है.
So it's like this, all these most of these slide visuals can be can be called a lecture on Indo-Saracenic architecture. At the end of that, one can see now, which the term he's also using partly. So he's also, the title was Architecture in Kutch. So the thing that we're doing, of which this is a part, which is supposed to be an ongoing project, to take these existing terms, which are existing from our current literature, which are written by, a lot of it is written by foreigners. That's an issue which is doesn't need to be, doesn't have to be very negative as such, but they're confusing. Indo-Saracenic, for example, is terribly confusing term. And we say, sometimes we think that Indo-Saracenic something to do with Indo-Islamic. So we look in that side, whereas Saracen in Arabic means east. It means east. So,
Sir, actually, the Crusaders used to call the Arab tribes as Saracens, and that's where the origin of the word has come.
well, as I know, the Arabic.
Islamic, is also used as a ground.
So now the point is that you suddenly a layperson is in Indo-Saracenic building. That kind of a dialogue also exists. So what we are trying to do is break it down to very basic, understandable terms, and then on that build up the issue of who calls it Indo-Saracenic and why. But even without knowing which is called Indo-Saracenic, if we break down these various kinds of architecture, the way they're constructed, into basic terminology and try to relate to the place. So on one end they are close to nature, therefore they're indigenous in that sense, and gradually they start getting matured. And then this happens, where this is an import of various things affiliated to it coming together. Many parts of them are individually very well developed at some place from where they are brought in, and they're affecting the local, so mix is happening here. There are purer situations also from that perspective. So there's still a lot more the architecture students can still do. One of the point is, you got a chance to stand and speak here. I complain that so much heritage movement has happened, is happening, and more will happen. Quite often, the idea of heritage and even conservation, not that all, but most, I complain, they ignore the historical part of it. So a lot of history of architecture that could be written in this country is now, is again looking that it's a possibility is still not flourishing because there is this whole overload of heritage, sorry to say. So that's a problem. So if this can be worked upon, so your lecture, one hopes that at some point of time, when this is placed in our system or some system, one can do analysis, how this really happened. Each lecture doesn't have time, it's 1 hour, half an hour, 45 minutes, and people go sleep and bored. And books are very fat to read also. So what we plan to do, a web-based presentation and an ongoing work. So an array of little knowledges, it's like the matrix, each cell can be a matter of research also. So much can be talked about in the Saracenic. At the same time, somebody who has not seen anything of this, like I have not this place, I can see lots of buildings that are happening. So that way also, everybody has not gone to every corner of the country yet. So that's the whole idea. So one hopes, who expects that this will be cut to pieces. For example, last time Benny was saying, at the end of the thing, he was talking about Amos Rappaport. And he said that, well, jo bhi aap kar rahe ho, I think the cultural thing is very important. The human system is very important. So it's not the material, but it is the culture which forms. He talked about buildings in Kerala, within parts of Kerala, how various parts of Kerala and various castes, they have differences in architecture. So he's applying that to show differences within which there are various elements. So he was of the firm belief that expressed at the end that theoretically speaking, if at all, that it is it's true that culture is what determines the form material. So he says that At the same time, it is not necessary that everybody will say that. Somebody will say it is the material which is affecting your thought and sort of inculcating in you or introducing in your thoughts some way to handle it. So it comes from there or there. One is not very sure, but there are various ways of talking about it. Some theoreticians say this way, some theoreticians say that way. So that array, rejecting one against the other is not necessarily right. So I'm winding up. So the Thanksgiving somebody will do. So thank you very much. The formal Thanksgiving somebody else will do.
Thank you, Mr. Hemant Sanghvi, for sharing your wide experience so generously.
Thank you.
Architectural Heritage Division would like to thank Chairman and Member Secretary in TAC for the support that such seminal research projects get from them. We are thankful to members of Advisory Committee of AH for encouraging AH in this research on architectural styles. We are very thankful to admin and maintenance staff of INTAC for their unrelenting support towards each event. Thank you to the team of AH for working consistently on the project and humbly incorporating reviews. We highly appreciate the vision of our Principal Director, Mr. Divya Gupta, for conceptualizing this pioneering study, and Professor Rajat Ray for intellectual guidance and being a very interactive advisor and critic. Last but not the least, the interest shown by audience like you encourages us to organize such activities. We would request you all to leave your emails and phone numbers in the register outside at the reception. But before that, we request Chairperson AH Advisory Committee, Professor K.T. Ravindran, to kindly give a token of our appreciation to Mr. Sanghvi. Thank you. Yes, and please also say a few words.
First token of appreciation in the form of a hug. Stand up and give me a hug.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Very nice.
Thank you, sir. Look at the camera. That's for
Oh
you.
yeah, all right. भूल गया मैं अच्छा okay.
Basically, I know it's pretty late and I don't want to give a long discussion on it, but I've known Hemant Sanghvi from early 80s. I won't reveal how we met because he requested me to
How and where?
outside in the lobby not to tell anyone as to how we met. So I leave that. But jab we met, it was the 80s, and even at that time, Hemant was very vigorously pursuing the same theme of vernacular architecture. In those days, I remember he was traveling around the eastern side of India and documenting vernacular architecture, and we used to have long slideshows. I was also very interested in vernacular, so we shared many occasions, and it's been a long-standing friendship, and it's very, very heartening to see that he still has the fire in his belly after almost 40 years. So thank you, Hemant. I think he's brought out a number of issues through the presentation. Like Rajat Ray also paraphrased, there is the research component in architectural heritage and history. There is actual construction techniques, and there is the dire need for conserving these buildings. At least these three dominant themes he has outlined quite clearly. And he's also connected, taken a continental sweep and connected it to the last detail of the Indo-Saracenic detail that he brings out. So this is a long sweep which is only available to people with the kind of experience, so many years of rigorous research experience that Hemant has. So thank you, Hemant, for being with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, sir. And you please do sign up so we can keep you posted. The next talk is by Professor K.T. Ravindran himself on 18th of October. We'll send you mailers.
Let me tell you one thing. That Gibson Turkey can always puncture. क्या